And we are live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Bigfoot Odyssey's Researchers Reports. Got a great show for you tonight. I'm Kerry Arnold. With me, as always, producer and co-host of the report, Miss Daniela ILO. How are you, dear?
I'm good, thank you.
Good deal, good deal. Our guest for this evening, man, that needs a little introduction, I suppose, but we're going to introduce him anyway. You've seen him on Discovery Channel, Animal Planet, Travel Channel. From Monster Quest to Finding Bigfoot, Monsters and Mysteries in America. He is a regular on Coast to Coast AM. This is a long list here, Lyle. I'm sorry. And author of some acclaimed books such as The Boggy Creek Monster and Lizard Man, Mr. Lyle Blackburn. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Man, great to have you on here.
Absolutely.
It's we'll just kind of give it just a few minutes. Let's let people pour in here. They're starting to pour in pretty quick now. Just want to remind everybody in the chat, y'all keep it clean for us. Be nice to each other. We're going to take questions for Lyle probably about the last quarter of the show. So make sure you get those all in caps for us. And makes it a lot easier for us to find. All right. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Lyle, you work on a lot of things. I know you and I were just talking. You're stuck inside like the rest of us for a while. You are working on a new book, and we'll get into that here in just a little bit. But I'm kind of curious, man. What started all this before you ever did any of the Boggy Creek stuff? What got you interested in it?
Well, I think it was just something I loved as a kid. I mean, I was always kind of a fan of horror movies and anything like that, monsters and things. And then when I became aware of cryptids from a book I got in school that covered Loch Ness Monster, Yeti, Bigfoot, things like that, I was really fascinated with that because, it's like, the possibility of these things living in our world. These are like, to me, they were like monsters that truly existed, and that's sort of a view of it when you're a kid. And so I was just enthralled with that. And a little bit later, I saw the movie The Legend of Boggy Creek in the 1970s, and that was something that dramatized accounts of a Bigfoot-like creature in southern Arkansas. And I grew up and lived near Fort Worth, Dallas, Texas. And Fouke, where that occurred, was very close to me. So that was something, much closer than, Scotland or the Pacific Northwest, or obviously the Himalayas where the Yeti was said to live. And so that really fueled the fire, so to speak. And I'd grown up hunting with my father, and, what was shown in The Legend of Boggy Creek, I just loved the small town and the swampy forest setting. And from then I just sort of was somebody who would read books on Bigfoot and things like that. And as younger, I never really thought about going to research myself necessarily. But later in life, I spent, most of my life either as a musician or a writer in some form or fashion. And fast forward many years, I wanted to write a book, and I thought, what is my favorite subject? And I thought, Bigfoot subject, and within that, The Legend of Boggy Creek, which was, alleged to be based on true sightings. So I went out and started researching that and ended up writing the book, The Beast of Boggy Creek, which I got a publishing deal, and it sold well, and TV started calling, and people responded, well to that. And I was doing Bigfoot conferences. So I just thought, hey, this is great, and so I then sort of became more of a serious researcher on a multitude of mostly southern Bigfoot incidents and cases.
Right. Well, did you just pick Boggy Creek, or was it something that hit kind of close to home for you? You just chose that one?
Well, I thought, since I had just a fascination for it, and it had some sentimental value because I'd seen the movie as a kid, and I'd camped in Arkansas and hunted, in North Texas and in those areas. I thought it's, there's a lot of great books have been written on Bigfoot in general. And I thought, I was amazed that nobody had ever written a book about the history of the creature, the Fouke monster, and even the making of the movie, because the movie was a huge thing back in the 1970s. I mean, it was
a lot of money.
A lot of money. It was huge. So I was surprised that nobody had written a book on that. So I thought it's a good niche, something that I can put boots on the ground. I can get to Fouke, and I can interview witnesses, and I can look at the places where the sightings occurred, that was a big part because, you know, that goes into sort of my adventure style, immersive approach to these books. And so that's why Boggy Creek was the perfect thing. Of course, I didn't realize how many people had the same kind of, you know, romantic view and memories of this film, especially people who, you know, later in life would turn out to be Bigfoot researchers. This movie influenced a lot of us. So it was just sort of the right thing at the right time back, you know, a decade ago when I did that. And, you know, it just went up from there.
Yeah, no, I can remember whenever I first got into just even remotely looking into Bigfoot, which is probably about 13 years ago. I remember a lot of the things that you did then. So you've been doing this for quite a while. Was it 10 years ago that you brought out that book?
Almost. I mean, the book was published in 2012, but I started the research and looking into that stuff around 2008, 2009 on upwards from there. So that's, yeah, it's been over a decade now.
Well, you've got a pretty good profile of things out here at this point in that period of time. You're working on a new book now, and we'll talk a little bit about, I want to talk about Lizard Man here in a little bit, but talk about the new book. What's coming up?
Well, the new book is something that I've kind of been piecing together over time. And I intended to actually do this book after The Beast of Boggy Creek, which was kind of, I kind of let things flow organically, and I did some other research and books between then. But this book is called Sinister Swamps, Monsters and Mysteries from the Mire. And instead of focusing on a particular case, as I've done with a few books like Lizard Man and Momo and Beast of Boggy Creek, right, this concentrates on geographic locations and some of my favorite geographic locations, which are swamps, because not only are they spooky and atmospheric, but they always have a history of strange phenomenon going on, which includes obviously Bigfoot, other cryptids, and even, you know, ghostly encounters, legends, buried treasure, missing persons, all kinds of weird stuff. So I've kind of had a theme of that with, in the Boggy Creek, it's kind of a swampy location, Lizard Man and other things. So as I've traveled around over time, I've visited a lot of major swamps, Okefenokee, Everglades, Scape-Ore Swamp, Honey Island Swamp, and sort of pieced together the story of those areas and then whatever phenomenon that has taken place. So it took me a lot longer to write this book because it just covers such a huge chunk of phenomenon and a lot of places, of which many I've been to.
Right. That Honey Island Swamp's just right down the road from here. That's a creepy place. I grew up around it. People talking about just strange things that happened out there, not just Bigfoot stuff, but just like spirit, ghostly stuff that happens down there in that place. So yeah, that's a bad place. And when we talk about Bigfoot, you know, Bigfoot's kind of getting to the point where it's not such a strange occurrence. You know, it's getting, that's a good thing. That's where we kind of want it to get, where it's in the forefront of people's mind. It's awareness. When you talk about Lizard Man and even Dog Man, Lizard Man, that kind of bothers me. You know, that it even that something like that could possibly be out there. Now, you wrote this book, and I haven't gotten into it, but I do plan to. Linda buys all the books. I don't. She gets all the stuff. So, what went into researching for this Lizard Man book? Did you talk to people that have actually seen this creature?
I did. Yeah, that one kind of, after I had done the Beast of Boggy Creek, like I said, it sold well. It was successful. People responded to my style of writing and research, and so I did what any rational person would do. I went on what I call the swamp tour. And that was all through the Southeast, in South Carolina and Georgia, Louisiana, Florida, went all over. But I ended up going to Bishopville, South Carolina, near Scape-Ore Swamp, where back in the late 80s, people had reported seeing what locals called the Lizard Man. And it was allegedly this sort of bipedal reptilian humanoid creature that on a few occasions had aggressively tried to attack people, pursue them, and it caused a huge media sensation there, not only in local and regional newspapers, but literally like Good Morning America was doing stories on the lizard man. Dan Rather and famous reporters were coming down there to Bishopville. It was just a really crazy thing. And so I didn't really have an intention of writing a book on it. I just thought it was a cool thing. And just the idea of people in modern times reporting sightings of what I thought was sort of a creature from the Black Lagoon. I ended up going there. I interviewed witnesses. I had spent a lot of time with retired Sheriff Liston Truesdale, who was the sheriff in Lee County at the time that all of this was going on. So he shared all the police files with me, and he had kind of approached this case in an unusual fashion. Most, as we know, most law and authorities and game wardens, they just blow this off. But instead, he actually took affidavits and had photos and all this paperwork from the witnesses that I was able to look at. And I thought, wow, this is just a crazy case. That's very interesting story. And it was something that kind of fit with, I mean, it's obviously Bigfoot sightings, and there had been sightings similar to that in that area, but this was just something unique. So it appealed to me as far as, a good book and just fun to research. And it was something that I been to Skateboard Swamp, and I just thought, I'm going with it.
Well, good. Of the books that I own, that I've purchased, is The Missing 411, and I've got Bayou Creek Monster on the Amazon Reader, and it's very well written. So if Lizard Man is anything like that, it should be interesting. We are going to have links. You'll be able to pick up Bayou Creek Monster or Lizard Man. Links will be in the description. Anybody wants to get those, I recommend both of those, obviously. And when you get this other one finished, man, you got to come back on, and we'll put that one out there too. Absolutely. I'm gonna let Daniela get into some of your experiences, and then we'll get through that, and we'll get into like I said, I'll let her do that. I don't have a program here. We just kind of roll with the punches,
Just make it up.
Yeah, that's all we do. Just make it up as we go. But I'm kind of trying to hold off a little bit until more people get in. We've got a pretty good crowd now, though. So, like I said, we will take you guys' questions on the last quarter, so you guys hold those for us, please. Go ahead, Daniela.
Creeks and swamps, water connection. Do you think there's a water connection to all these cryptids out there?
I think so. I've definitely seen that as a pattern in the research and investigating sightings of not just Bigfoot, but other cryptids. And of course, this would be a place where naturally these creatures would be seen, because not only is this a source of water, something they need, especially Bigfoot, they need a lot of water. Just think how much you would drink if you were outside in the heat. But as well, it's a place where they can travel rather, secluded, because most rivers and creeks and waterways are, concealed by trees. Some of these are on public land. They cut under the highways. This is the perfect sort of network of highways that Bigfoot would follow in moving around, which is necessary because any other large mammal that requires as much food and sustenance as these creatures would conceivably need, would need to move around. So if you sort of overlay a map with the places where sightings are, they're usually coordinated with where there's waterways. It's a definite pattern.
What about personal experiences for you then? What have you seen?
Well, I've never actually, seen a creature that I can definitively say was a Bigfoot or any other cryptid. That being said, I've been what I believe was close to a possible encounter a couple of times. Once in the Boggy Creek area where something was howling, and then it followed myself and another researcher along a bayou channel, and then howled at us directly across from our camp. We were able to hear it, numerous times, and could determine that this howl wasn't a coyote. It was not a a wolf or a sound of a fox or a cougar or any normal thing. And then once when I was in Florida in the Ocala National Forest, there was something hitting on a can, which was making this sound. And at that point, it was kind of a deserted time to be there because it was in January. And I sort of grabbed the flashlight and plunged into the woods looking, and whatever this thing was, and you could hear that it was big and it was running, seemed like on two legs, but it was just ahead. As soon as I shined the flashlight, it would move, and then I'd move a little further until it finally just outdistanced me into the thicket. Found some various footprints and other evidence over the years, but unfortunately never had a sighting. A lot of people I know get into this because they had a sighting. I think for myself, it was almost like the fascination with it. And then of course you're always sort of in that mode of thinking, okay, here it is, but that's not the way things work. It's almost like you have to be in the right place at the right time.
I think it's pretty rare to find someone that gets into this and has any level of success. I mean, especially like you've had, that's just in it for the interest. Usually you're right. It's someone that's either had an experience because they take it that much farther. It's not just something they delve into and look into, but I mean, you took it just as far as you could take it. It takes a lot of dedication and work ethic to get anything out of this, because I know.
Well, and I think, where I was originally coming from in this is in a lot of ways I modeled myself on John Green, which Sasquatch, the Apes Among Us. He's written some of the best Bigfoot books, that there are, and everybody should read these books. They're sort of the Bible of the history of Bigfoot. John Green never had a sighting, but his important role became that, unfortunately, that he took this seriously enough to document so many of these sightings and so many of these seminal cases that it gave us a record and sort of a history of where these sightings were. So I feel like, there's a value on sightings, but there's also a value on quality documentation and interviewing people. And I simply find these stories and interviewing people fascinating. So even if I don't see anything myself, it's still fun. And I think important because, just being immersed in this and hearing the stories is a treat unto itself, and sort of getting to go to the places where there is the possibility of sightings and things like that. So
I actually took an excerpt from his Wildman book that he published in '78 when he did the Albert Osmond story. And I did a narration of that on our other channel, which is called the Shudder. If you're not subscribed there, go subscribe there. You can hear the Osmond story on there. And just the way it's written, I mean, it's a hell of a tale to begin with. I mean, the man being kidnapped by Sasquatch and held for 6 days. But just the way he wrote it, the way he laid everything out there, and I narrated it. I did it word for word, exactly how he did it. It ended up being almost 30 minutes long. And it's just a beautiful story. I love that. It's extremely compelling. It's got everything in it. Osmond, he signs the sworn affidavit, takes a polygraph and passes the thing, 40 years later. It was an incredible story. But you're absolutely right about John Green. I mean, the way the man wrote, that's the only thing I've ever read that he's written. I should get all these books, but I don't. I don't get them. My mother made me read too much when I was growing up, I guess.
Yeah, reading is, it takes a lot of time. But I feel like, and I see this as a commonality of, I've been doing this a long time and seeing the level of interest in Bigfoot rise. And I see a lot of things on the internet of people that seem to not know the history, like to have read Sasquatch, the Apes Among Us, just to sort of give that sort of, base level history, because I see debates going on of things that are already covered in the books and things. So I think it's important for anybody who gets into or wants to pursue these research. The thing I tell them to do is kind of get up to speed on what is the history of a particular area maybe that they're at, and then go into the woods and then, debate photos and other things, but having a good, basis, or almost like a, Sasquatch 101 education is good to have in terms of that. And also when you get questions from people, like people hear, oh, you know, Bigfoot's, I can't believe you look for Bigfoot. Well, the more you know, and the more you can cite off some historical things that, you know, like there is a history of this. It didn't just pop up yesterday and not in our area. That's important to just know that kind of thing.
It is important. And especially when it comes to validity and validating this creature, you know, we always try to push awareness. But to me, what's as important, because it's that time. Everybody wants their information right now. They want that HD footage of a Bigfoot walking through the woods. And if anybody ever gets it, I hope somebody does one day. But what's going to be as important as that is the story. Somebody's got to tell the story. Somebody's got to add some context to it, because, you know, if you just throw a picture up of a Bigfoot walking through the woods, what's everybody going to say? 80% of anybody that has nothing to do with Bigfoot, it's fake. It's not real. So if you can get people like you that come in and like we do, we tell the story. If you tell the story, you get to know these people a little bit better. You get a kind of a feel of who they are. You know, it's not just a bunch of rednecks running around out there screaming in the woods and beating on trees. You know, they're doing this. These are just regular everyday people that have taken it upon themselves to go get this done. And so if you learn a little bit about them, then the history and the story for context, along with the evidence, I think that's the only way we can go, especially in the digital age. It's just too many things out there that can be manipulated, you know. So you got to get people's trust. It's all about trust.
Well, and yeah, it is a hard age. I mean, on one hand, we have the technology, which has advanced us to the point where maybe this will assist in the validation of the species. You know, we've got tools like thermal cameras that help us zero in on where they might be. But at the same time, you've got the capability to do CGI and to fake these things. So it's a constant battle of things appearing on the internet, you know, quick videos, like you say, that people just jump all over. We got to be more careful to evaluate that before we tout that as good evidence, because a lot of times it comes up as a fake, because it's easy to fake stuff and film stuff. So got to be very careful to do our best to validate and investigate what it is before we broadcast as, oh, here's the greatest video, and then get bit in the butt, you know.
Well, plus not everybody's a professional videographer. So you have a lot of people out there that are doing this that have great evidence, but they don't know how to present it. You know, so when they do put it up there, a lot of the context is not provided and it just ends up getting bashed. So do you think that it'll ever happen without a type specimen?
No, I mean, it will need a type specimen at this point. It's just the only way that it's going to definitively prove the creature. And that doesn't suggest that we should actively try to obtain one or kill one. I mean, there's views on both sides of that, obviously. But the fact is Bigfoot has just become this sort of cultural icon. You know, people see it as something used in commercials or something that makes, you know, quick blog posts and, you know, these sensational, you know, network TV shows. So that because of all that, you're really going to have to go the distance to prove it, because, you know, at this point, most people's, or the common person's view of this is Bigfoot. Oh yeah, I know what that is. That's just this fake. Right. You're going to have to persuade them much more than just a grainy video. Well,
that's probably how I would have been. The exact same way, you know, completely indifferent to it, just not even, didn't care one way or the other. You know, it wouldn't matter. It didn't really matter to me whether this creature existed or not. So I can kind of understand how a lot of people think about this, you know, when they see, or even come, if you hear it on the news, it's going to be satirical, and that's a shame. But that's just unfortunate that people are, no one in the news media or any major news media is going to take it seriously, because it's probably going to be a career killer for them. I mean, that's sad to say, but
yeah, they always, even if they come across displaying the story as, you know, just as it is, they always smirk at the end and make that little joke. You think, you know, Bigfoot's coming to your party this weekend, or whatever it is they say, and that protects them from people saying, oh, you buy into that, because they're afraid and usually they probably don't know enough about it to even make a judgment to whether it's real or not, because they're just doing the story. But yeah, you're right. They're reluctant to validate anything.
Well, the proof is in the pudding. Look what Meldrum went through. The guy was, well, he came out and talked about it being a human primate. Oh my goodness. He called all kind of crap for that. Of course, he's backed up since then, and we've talked about that on here about calling it an ape. But I think once he gets out of his professional, he'll go back to his original opinion. That's the way I feel about it. He had to appease the scientific group and all the people that just wanted him fired. I mean, it was ridiculous. So the proof is in the pudding there. You can understand why some people in that aspect of it kind of backpedal on the subject. For us, for what we see, the best way through this is just to try to make people aware. Whether you believe in it or not, just be aware. If you're a hunter, if you hike a lot, you've probably had encounters with these things and you don't even know it. Every little small twig break or heard something run off, that you thought was something else, or hear some strange scream in the distance or a tree knot. All we ask people to do is consider it. Just consider it as a possibility. That way, when you're out there and this thing does happen and it steps out on you, you're not completely and totally freaked out by it,
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think for every encounter there has been reported, there's probably many more times when people
absolutely
potentially encountered one and just didn't see it. I mean, you've got to consider, the logical premise that if these creatures do exist, they have to be masters of their domain. They have to be masters at survival and evasion. There's no way about it. It's not just dumb luck that they haven't been, proven or run over by a truck. While they do cross roads and have been, in my opinion, made some errors of being seen or have been guilty of being curious and gotten a little too close. For the most part, for them to have survived, they've got to remain vigilant. They've got to remain elusive and live in the remote areas where they can continue to live without, being overrun by our modern expansion. So, given that, I don't think it's as easy to just walk into the woods and see one as people might think. These things are, even you think of other animals. I mean, you go into a jungle in Sumatra. I mean, there's tigers and all sorts of things out there, but you're lucky if you ever see one, or maybe unlucky if you do. But they're there. You just simply don't see them. And even wildlife here. I mean, you can walk right by deer and other things. They are made to blend in with the environment. And if a creature like Bigfoot has a higher intelligence, they could do it even better.
And I think that's one thing people don't consider, is not that we have a good understanding of it, but having a relative understanding of the nature of this creature, which is apparently to hide. It's not something that's learned. It's just in them. It's just born in them to hide. It's all about survival. And it doesn't take a whole lot of critical thought to see how it's possible that this creature's never been, filmed readily, but most people see this creature as, if it's out there, we should be able to see it in the woods. I was watching a little skunk ape video earlier, and this biologist at the zoo, she took care of the chimpanzee. They were talking about the skunk ape picture from Mayaka. The long hairy thing, his eyes are glowing, and she's saying, it kind of looked like an orangutan a little bit. But right there at the end, what did she say? She said, you would think if something like that is out there, we would have seen it already. And that's just all that is just a zero understanding of, or even looking into it, because thousands of people have seen these things down there. That's just one of the better images you're going to find. So it's unfortunate people don't want to have an understanding of it. And when you try to tell them, it's too hard for them to believe. And
well, it's not even an understanding of how wildlife works. I mean, if they're there, it doesn't mean you can see them. I mean, there's been animals, that live in remote areas or that have very small populations, and people are actively trying to find them and have a hard time doing it. So if it's a creature like Bigfoot that conceivably try to stay away from us, even harder. So, animals can do amazing things, and I don't think we give animals even enough credit. They're doing, they're surviving even when we're plowing right into their,
their habitats. And yeah, absolutely. Deer, I deer hunted for 29 years, and you're not going to see a deer if he's not moving. If he's just standing there, I mean, unless you're really good and just can pick them out. But they're, like you said, they're hard to see. All these things blend in. And, I heard Grover Krantz, the argument about the body, why haven't we found a body? And if you don't have to think too hard on this, anybody that has looked into the subject very long, Grover Krantz always made the argument, well, you don't ever find any dead bears. I never thought that was the best argument myself. But if you really think about this creature, and I say this a lot, their viewers have probably heard this from me 100 times. You're talking about a sentient being that's predisposed to hiding, that's intelligent, not being found out. Why would they leave one of their dead around for us to find? That's what people are not thinking about that. So I think they bury them. What do you think? Think they bury their dead?
I think it's a possibility. I mean, and again, it kind of goes with the logic of the fact that we haven't just run across, carcasses and things. In order for them to exist, they would need to, be conscious of dying, on the road or anything like that. And as what they probably have is family units that would take care of their dead, whether they bury them or hide them deep in the woods or whatever they do. They're actively concealing. And you're right. The dead bear argument it's a good one, but that kind of depends on luck. But I mean, there's a lot more bears than what would conceivably be a population of Sasquatch. So if you don't find dead bears on a regular basis, you're probably not going to find a Sasquatch.
Right.
And I mean, I'm sure places where there's been. I know there was a bear sighting in Fouke not long ago. I've been hiking through those woods. I know bears exist, but I've never seen one there. I only saw it was actually a blurry picture. That's the best the guy could get.
But you knew it was a bear. And I wasn't suggesting that was a bad argument. I just thought it wasn't our best one.
Yeah. It doesn't completely, it still leaves something desired as an explanation. Right. So I think with a lot of Bigfoot, we can only conjecture as far as what we know because we don't have one to examine. We can't watch its behavior like we could. So we only can make the best conjecture that's allowable based on the data we have.
And that's another thing about this creature. When you talk about behavior, is the apparent diversity from one coast to another of this creature and how they behave and how they look and how they act. So even if you did get a type specimen, I mean, if you did have one alive and were able to watch it, or someone was watching a group for 20 years, would they really know anything about the Sasquatch as a whole? Or would they know something about this group? Because I kind of equate it to people. We all act differently from place to place, group to group. I made the point last time about the American Indians. There was 18 million American Indians here 1,000 years ago in 80 different tribes, 400 offshoots, and they all spoke a different language. Each tribe spoke differently. So that's kind of how I see the Sasquatches. I think they have different mannerisms. Maybe they have rules. Who knows? You would think that some creature with that type of sentient would have some kind of a base for life. I'm not saying that I think they're grounded in morality either way or the other. I don't think they're evil or good in any sense. I think it's all about opportunity and survival. Absolutely. But you still have to think that each group has their own little thing, modes of communication, things like that. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a really great way to look at it is the tribes of the Native Americans. And I kind of tried to look at this in my Southern Sasquatch book called Beyond Boggy Creek, where I zeroed in on about 10 of the southern states where there's been a history of sightings. And tried to, figure out, is there a difference? We call skunk apes, and a lot of those sightings seem to describe a more ape-like creature, whereas if you get over to Honey Island Swamp, they describe sort of a Bigfoot-like creature, but it's somewhat different. And then Boggy Creek, all those being different than the Pacific Northwest. So I think, there's no doubt that, judging from what people have presented as descriptions and sightings and reports, that it seems to suggest that there's different species, or at least they've adapted in some way to their environment so that they're different from each other. They're not all just sort of that iconic Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot. They vary a lot.
And that kind of worries me a little bit, that if this creature is validated, okay, if and when, that's how it's kind of going to be, is that they'll be able to find a group of them, and then they'll start bringing out all these facts about this creature. And then you've got 10,000, well, maybe not that many, 1,000 Bigfoot researchers that are going to flip their wig, that have been putting out all this other stuff because they're observing something different somewhere else. So I think it's going to be a bigger crap show, probably years of litigation involved in validating this creature just from the PETA side of it, But that's what it worries me, that if this creature is validated, it's just going to be that much more of a poop show.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I really can't even imagine what would happen. Just the finding of something like that, not only that it's Bigfoot and people, thought, oh, I thought that was just stories. Oh, here it is, to the fact that what is this thing? And the fact that it has managed to elude us. That's a shocker, and all the scientists that, blew it off, and then suddenly it was like, would want to look at this thing. And I don't know, it just changed the world. I mean, it would just be far up and above just us debating in our online or Facebook groups. It would be just a world phenomenon, just figuring out what it is and what does it do and how does it think,
Well, what do you think about the ABC guys keeping this thing hidden, or do you think they do?
I mean, I don't really buy in much to any of the claims of hidden ones, or I've got bodies that have been buried or anything else, because what is the purpose of all that? You either show it or hush. It's like, to me, it's like there's been various stories over the years where people have say they've hidden, or that the government knows about them, or there's bones in the Smithsonian, but they always lead to nowhere. It's like, either show the thing or just forget that, because I just never buy into that, because I think if somebody did have one of these, a body that could be presented, they'd be showing it off. They would be trying to sell it or do whatever, but they would show it. It wouldn't hide it and then just talk about it. I don't think that's human nature.
Right. No. Who was the guy that had the Minnesota Iceman? That was apparently, if you listen to Lloyd Pye, apparently that was a real creature. It wasn't really big.
No, that wasn't. No, that wasn't real. That
wasn't real.
No, in fact, the new issue of the Bigfoot Times actually has an article about that. But Frank Hansen, the carny that created that, had a lot of stories. But it's the guys who actually made that for him have now come out and said, yeah, we made that. It was very convincing. And there's a lot of smoke and mirrors, because that's what carnies did. But, I've seen the actual Minnesota Iceman, the unfrozen piece. And again, Frank Hansen did have a story that, well, there was another actual body and it's owned by a millionaire who won't come forward. But again, it's the same story as, oh, well, some unnamed millionaire owns it. Forget it. That guy would show that body. He wouldn't just.
Right.
So it always ends in that same, no matter how it comes around, it ends in that same dead end road where it's like put up or shut up roads where, I don't buy them. So some of them take longer to disprove, but that's my feeling.
Well, I did not know that. I always went on like that thing was real, and somebody just took it and got rid of it. You know.
Yeah, well, the stories have come out in pieces. In fact, in my new book, Momo, which talks about the Missouri monster, the Missouri Bigfoot, I had a woman describe to me seeing one of these frozen things years before the Minnesota Iceman was ever shown, which it didn't start being shown till '67. This woman had seen something in '64 in Missouri, of all places, which kind of played into the Momo, Missouri case. But anyway, I've studied the Minnesota Iceman. I was even on an episode of Shipping Wars, the one where the Minnesota Iceman exhibit was shipped down here. A friend of mine in Texas at Museum of the Weird in Austin bought it. But I think this, if everybody, and everybody really should, if you don't know what the Bigfoot Times is, it's published by Daniel Perez out of California, and he's been publishing this for years. It's just it's a cool little newsletter you get every month, but it's got great content. But the newest issue literally covered the Minnesota Iceman and had some facts in there, which even Daniel, we just sort of said, you know, this is the smoking gun. You really can't debate this anymore, given, you know, this research. So yeah, people should Google Bigfoot Times and get that issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose it would be easy to hide in ice. A lot easier to hide little details.
Again,
like
smoke
that.
and mirrors. It's a common technique, and it was good, and it was a cool looking thing. But again, it was like, you know, it's conveniently in ice. You know?
Well, let's talk about this for a second. Patterson-Gimlin, which is probably the linchpin for the most of what goes on in Bigfoot today. A lot of people's interest, I would say it sparked the whole thing. People think it's the footprints that were found in '58. It's got to be the Patterson-Gimlin film. Is that real or not?
Well, I mean, you know, as a balanced researcher, I would just never say it's real, because I have no way to back up or prove that. And we're really never going to be able to discern that definitive proof by looking at what we have. And that is, you know, a minute of grainy footage, all the anecdotal stories that go with it, and the footprints. That being said, I mean, I'm still on the fence. I mean, I think it's real, and it definitely could be real, but I wasn't there. I know Bob Gimlin, and if I had to base this on what I've learned from Bob Gimlin and hearing the story multiple times, I would say that unless Bob Gimlin was, you know, hoaxed or fooled, then it must be real, because I just really don't think that he was or would be involved in a hoax. So if it was a hoax, it was a masterful one, because even one of the witnesses didn't even know it. So I can never be for sure, but I want it to be real, and I hope it's real, and I hope someday maybe there could be a way to actually validate and prove that to the world that it is.
Well, I believe it's real. And I don't really look at the creature as much as I look at, like you said, Bob Gimlin, because all these things that came out, the 3 different people that claimed to be in the suit, it was too easy for him at too many places to come forward if it wasn't true. It was too easy, and it was too easy for him to do it then, and he didn't. He's still holding to his, and it's been 52 years. So I think it's going on 53 years now. So I believe the thing's real, and I believe, like you said, if it's not, they fooled him. But man, what would that have entailed?
And he was carrying a rifle, so that was risky at best to do that. But you're right. I mean, he had no monetary stake in it. Why would he just simply keep quiet about this, especially under the pressure and ridicule and everything else he's had to endure? For what? He didn't get any. I mean, for any of those years, he didn't receive any monies for it. So he would have had no reason not to blow the whistle if there was a whistle to be blown.
Well, Daniela's going to take over. As soon as Daniela gets her questions out of the way, we'll take some questions for the chat. From the chat.
From the chat, yeah. Lyle, with all the interviews you've spoke to different people, there's obviously we hear about Bigfoot encounters, and then we also hear that there's strange things that happen at the same time. That aren't kind of things like maybe mind speak or zapping and things like that. How do you feel about that sort of stuff? Where do you put that?
Well, I mean, again, I can't say that it's not something going on, because there's no way I can prove or disprove. In general, from what I've evaluate from having interviewed literally hundreds of people, is that most of them are very grounded. They see something, it appears to be a living, breathing, biological creature that they have a glimpse of or have the opportunity to come into contact with enough to where they can, say that's a Bigfoot. A few of those talk about things like it communicated telepathically or had other supernatural powers of some sort. Those are the exception in my experience, and usually those are the witnesses that I would deem a lot of times, the least credible. Not because they're saying that something really strange went down, but that I just tend to find those individuals what I would consider questionable based on just investigative interviewing that I've done. Again, I don't want to besmirch anybody's claim or whatever. I'm not in their mind, but I have a problem with the mind speak as well, just simply that this would require some level of super intelligence, some way to communicate in English. And from what I've heard, some of these claims, it would also require them to have a knowledge of our society structure and our infrastructures and our culture that I just don't know how in the world they could know. They couldn't communicate about that stuff. How would they even know? So I tend to just keep that in the super strange category and just kind of carry on with the basic witnesses that and there's plenty of those to interview. So that extreme field is sort of for somebody else's research.
Yeah, that's where we stand for sure.
How do you feel like over, say, just like the last 10 years you've been studying it, have you learned anything more about Sasquatch that you didn't know, say, 10 years ago? Have we learned anything more over the years, do you think? Or
I don't think at all. I've learned way more about the people who look for Sasquatch over the years, but the creature itself, what I learned, and even almost prior to what I knew going into more active research, not a lot of light has been shed. It's just the same sort of puzzling questions and the same sort of glimpses that we've been dealing with for 50 plus years, and we still kind of don't know much more about them than Roger Patterson knew, which is frustrating, but doesn't mean that we shouldn't continue to pursue it.
Makes it hard for us.
Do you think some people, because people invest a lot of time in this, don't they? The researchers can put literally everything they've got into it. Do you think at some point when it turns into like a personal kind of journey, I guess that's maybe not the right word, do you think then they've made connections with these things and then they decided they don't want to make this public? Do you think anyone's doing that and then realized, actually, I don't want to put these things at risk or something like that?
Yeah, that's a definite possibility. I think that, whatever we think about these creatures and whatever, view or romanticized view we have about them could very easily change if you actually see one in real life, much less if it's in some way communicates with you. Suddenly you may have a different idea about why you're doing this and what you're doing it for. I've seen researchers who who have gone back and forth from first they were, pro kill to no kill and back, people change as they learn more or perceive more about what they think these things are. So yeah, I think if it was communicating with it, perhaps those are the best stories because those people are not sharing with us. They're not posting online or coming on and doing interviews. They got something going on that they're not going to tell anybody about because they're protecting that species.
Yeah, I think there's some of that going on, definitely. I think it's a lot to give up, isn't it? Once you put so much into it, because everybody's looking for it, it must feel like quite a prize just to have that.
You gotta think in that same vein that people that do get out there and look for it, because so much hasn't changed, you're not really learning a whole lot. It's easy to get burnt out on. A lot of people get into this and then they just jump right back out of it and that's what makes it hard for us to hold people that don't look into it, because when they look back after 2 years, what's new? What's changed? Is anything new in this? No, it's still the same old stuff. So
yeah, it's just more controversy and more arguments over
right
in a new format, which is why I don't get disinterested or burn out, because I don't come at this trying to prove Bigfoot or even prove it to the world. It's like, that's not my objective. I just like the subject and like the personal research. I like getting out there in the woods, going places. This gives me an excuse to go on great adventures. I like the people that I met along the way, like meeting Kerry. We met at a conference, and then, we get to do an interview here, or we might run into each other somewhere else.
Yeah.
Those things are exciting. So I kind of center those as, valuable just as much as, wow, it would be cool if I could get a great picture of one or prove it or have some great thing to share that it was previously unknown. But we have to try to find, value in everything about the journey and just enjoy that we're looking for something unknown. And we must recognize that we don't all have the answers, nor do we all have the best theory. We just have to be in this together and do our best.
Yeah.
Well, that's the reason we do this show, and we kind of force speculation. We make the distinction. You're not going to ever hear us say this is what this creature does, this is what it doesn't do. We hear enough of that from the experts. But here, we like to force speculation because we feel like it's all we've got. And if we're at least doing that, we're reinventing, we're coming up with new reasons, we're keeping it alive, we're keeping it going, we keep, more interest. So for us, it's important. It may seem hokey and weird and strange for people to come in and just speculate about all these crazy things. But to me, it's important that we do that, because what else we got, really? You want to take some questions from the chat? Let's do that. We got about 8 minutes left. Did you see any? I saw quite a few. I think
I've seen a lot about Buff the old.
We got them going.
What's going on at the moment? We're not going to comment on all that.
I'm going to say this, and I want you guys just to think critically for a second how ridiculous it is. The notion that anything happened beyond what's in that film, from the type of evidence that's in it, as far as anything being killed, or there being this whole conspiracy theory about being 5 Bigfoot, that you can get any of that from the Patterson-Gimlin film, is absolutely ridiculous. That's how I feel about it. If you guys don't like it, I apologize, but we're not going to go on and on about that here. Not on this show. I'm sorry.
That stuff needs to stop. That we can't even prove that's a Bigfoot, number one. We can't even prove it's a Bigfoot, much less all that other stuff, which is drawn out of very grainy stuff. That stuff is just a waste of time and arguments over. Just
it hurts us. It hurts,
and it makes Bigfoot research look bad. We want mainstream scientists to jump on board here. They're not when you are throwing stuff like that at them. That whole thing needs to stop.
Absolutely, it needs to stop. It needs what people need to think about is there's no way to prove that. Zero, especially from that film. And who is it hurting? It's really hurting Bob Gimlin. And I'm sorry, that pisses me off when I hear these things and people talk about this thing. And I know I'm keeping it going, but I want people to know how I feel about this. And I'm glad to hear that you feel the same way about it. But all it does is hurt Bob Gimlin. That's all it really does. It doesn't. You're not helping anything.
It doesn't.
No
And
way
I mean, there's the I stand with Bob, and I certainly do, but actually, I don't do it because I stand with Bob. I stand for sanity. That's why. That is just from outer space. It's not, there is no basis for that, I mean, and just no reason for it.
Nope.
John Green would just imagine what some of those guys who originally were doing this, and there was only a few of them, would think about this stuff. They would just roll over laughing.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I was going to say. Rolling over. But those were the giants. We're standing on their shoulders. Sure. Here we go. Zach from New Expedition says, Lyle, do you think people that had proof of existence would be threatened not to talk? You heard of that?
It's possible, I suppose, if this came to the attention of big business of some sort, and the big business thought it was going to threaten their livelihood or like shut down logging operations, it's possible that they would hire somebody to quell any coming forward of a Bigfoot. But I'm not big on the conspiracies. The government can barely control a flu virus, much less cover up Bigfoot, because people talk. And if there would, I don't think that there's a concerted effort to cover it up. But you're right. Somebody could be threatened if it threatened economics.
Well, you think the logging industry would have a bigger stake in this creature coming out than the government? Mm-hmm. I mean, look, what would PETA do if this creature was validated? I mean, these creatures are hard enough to find. How much court would they have to go through just to go log a section of land to get somebody a Bigfoot? That might be a job for some of us. Hey, come tell us if there's a Bigfoot out here so we can log it.
It's a new job opportunity.
New job opportunity.
Go on from Brandon. What's your opinion on Dogman?
Well, I mean, it sort of goes into the lizard man category, where the biological, speculation on that is a little more out there, but there are a lot of witnesses and quality witnesses that have reported seeing these creatures that appear to be extraordinary canids or some sort of hybrid or whatever they are. That we have to consider that what is Dogman. So I'm looking into that, and I'm considering maybe that's a book to write, because I've gotten a lot of reports lately, and it's certainly it's a cool subject and a spooky subject. So
that thing will sell like crazy, man. So many people want to hear Dogman. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think I'm going to work on that.
There you go. See, I don't want to believe the thing is real. I hope it's not. But when you hear some of these accounts, what people see, and then Bigfoot can have a real pronounced gnathic index. That real prognathic mouth that looks like a muzzle, and who knows? I'm just hoping it's a misidentified Sasquatch.
Yeah, I got one report from the Boggy Creek area where she said she felt like it had an elongated snout, but she was actually a wildlife photographer, and she thought it's possible it had something in its mouth, maybe a squirrel, because at the distance and the briefness of crossing the road, she couldn't absolutely be sure, other than she saw that sort of. That to me was one that could go either way. It could have gone in the Dogman category, or was the Falcon monster. Hard to say.
No doubt. I think Andy had one about Lizard Man, didn't he? I just saw it.
He said, do you think it's a Sasquatch hybrid that's aquatic?
Yeah. Where was it?
No, but one of my theories that I proposed, that it could have been not so much a lizard man, but a Bigfoot who was either wet. It could have been covered in algae. It could have had a skin condition, like you've seen the pictures of bears with mange, something like that, to where it appeared to have a scaly skin. It could have rolled in mud or anything else. I mean, these are animals or creatures that are in environments like the swamp. So it's weird to explain one cryptid with another, but it's possible that it was simply a Bigfoot that appeared that way. not so much an aquatic Bigfoot. I mean, there's some fringe research in that direction, but in general, primates or primate-like things do not swim and don't like water generally. So probably not an aquatic Bigfoot.
Okay.
We got one. Let's do one more real quick.
Yeah.
Let's do this one right here from 5 Hazel. Real quick. Share your most fearful encounter.
I guess, is that me?
Yeah, that's you, man. They all know us.
Well, I know that, but one that's told to me, I mean, there's a lot of crazy ones. But for me, the scariest one was when I was in Mercer Bayou up in Fouke, and myself and my late friend, Tom Shirley, were paddling up the bayou one evening, and it was about midnight. It was dark. We're out there in the middle of nowhere, and we hear this howl come up, and it was somewhere over on the land. And immediately we thought, that's either the weirdest coyote we've ever heard, or that's not a coyote. And then it repeated several times, and at that point we determined, this isn't a usual animal. My friend Tom, he spent many years in the woods. He had even been a trapper in Mississippi, so a lot of perspective on what that could be. And we're thinking, well, perhaps this is the Fouke monster. So then it went silent. And so eventually we paddled back down the bayou. And when we got out and pulled the canoe up and started going up to our camp, the camp is up on a hill because that area can flood. And about the time we got up there, all of a sudden we hear this howl. Whatever this thing was had either followed us or it was there, but it howled and was right on the other side of the bayou where we had just pulled that canoe out. And of course, when you hear that and it's much closer, the hair on the back of your neck stands up, and you're just immediately, Tom's trying to get the recorder going again. And I just grabbed the flashlight and bounded down that hill and tried to get a look at it. I'm like, this may be my only opportunity. It may grab me and pull me into the bayou, but who cares? I'm going for it. So I, ran down that hill and, shine that light, and your heart's pumping, and I don't even know if you're even, whether to be scared or just excited. You don't know what you're thinking, just trying to take that opportunity. But whatever this was moved away and then howled again from the woods about 50 yards down. And we never saw it again. But I think that possibly the closest we've been to the Fouke monster, and certainly the most exciting, and the time when we calmed down to realize the thing just silently came through the woods and could have just come up here and grabbed us. You realize you're not the masters of the bayou. Creatures like that are.
Well, when you hear that, you got to think a little bit deeper. Then it's more than just hearing a howl. When you're there around it, that, okay, this thing's out here, one, and it doesn't care if we hear it, two. So, and it's making a scary screaming noise. Yeah, I would probably, I don't know, faint, pass out, something. I don't know. I'm not a Bigfoot researcher. I'm never going to be a Bigfoot researcher. I'll tell other people's story, and I'm good with that. But hey, Lyle, we appreciate you coming on here tonight. I want to let everybody know to make sure you go and subscribe to Hidden Existence. This is our 98th show. We got 99 coming up Saturday, our 100th show next Wednesday, 7 o'clock p.m. Central. It's going to be a 2-hour special. Got a lot of guests coming on, going to make some appearances. And after that, no more show on Saturday. It's going to be only on Wednesdays. You'll get researchers' reports. So make sure you subscribe to Hidden Existence. Daniela is going to be taking up that slack for Saturday on her show. Make sure you go subscribe to the Shudder right now. Links in the description. That's the narration show. All it is stories. It's not just Bigfoot. It's ghosts and goblins and all kind of good stuff, but it's accounts. It's stuff that's been given to me. So it's not just a bunch of made up hooey stuff. It might be. I don't know. If somebody else made it up and sent it to me. So go subscribe there. We're going to have links in the description for Lyle's books. Make sure you go and you can find all this stuff on Amazon. Momo, Boggy Creek Monster, which is really good. Lizard Man. And what's the new book coming?
Sinister Swamps. That'll be coming out here in about 3 weeks. So yeah, just hit my lyleblackburn.com and you can.
Yes, go to lyleblackburn.com. That's right. Make sure you go there right now. lyleblackburn.com. You can find all this stuff there too. So Lyle, we appreciate you coming on here tonight, buddy. Thanks everyone for showing up. Had a great crowd, and it's been awesome. Thank you.
You bet. Good seeing you.
Yeah, you too, bud. Stick around.
Good night, everyone.